the top in terms of Twitter and other social media platforms. This executive order, there's a lot of speculation about it, so let's just cut through that and get to the facts from you. What will this executive order actually say, and what do you hope will be the impact?
So I won't get ahead of the president on that. He hasn't signed the executive order yet. It's still in the works. So I don't want to point to exactly what actions he will take. But what I do want to point to is the reason for this executive order. We have seen some egregious actions by Twitter for them to single out the president's tweet, which was a very truthful tweet. You've got to ask yourself, what kind of political motivation was there in them doing that when they were not signaling until minutes ago before I walked out here, they were not fact-checking Chinese propaganda that was blaming COVID on the United States military. There was no fact-check of Chinese propaganda, but they managed to fact-check in a wrong way the president of the United States. And you've got to ask, when they're hiring people like this man right here as the head of the site integrity, Yoel Roth, who's tweeted that members of this administration are Nazis. He's the one making the determinations on fact checks. He's part of that team. That's pretty egregious, and Twitter needs to answer for this and for their behavior.
Jack Dorsey takes on that very point. The White House, Kellyanne Conway yesterday, singling out employees of the company. In a new tweet, he says this: fact check. There is someone ultimately accountable for our actions as a company, and that's me. Please leave our employees out of this. We'll continue to point out incorrect or disputed information about elections globally, and we will admit to and own any mistakes we make. He says this does not make us an arbiter of truth. Our intention is to connect the dots of conflicting statements and show the information in dispute so people can judge for themselves. More transparency from us is critical so folks can clearly see the why behind our actions. So what does the White House have to win when it comes to singling out employees at that company, Kayleigh?
So interesting. So Twitter wants this to be the standard. They get to, quote, fact check the president of the United States in an untruthful way, not fact check Chinese propaganda until we pointed it out, and they started doing it moments ago. But yet we don't get to ask who the fact checkers are. That's an untenable proposition, and it's an unfair proposition, and we will ask who the fact checkers are. And let me just note that there are two models here. You have Facebook and you have Twitter, and you have Mark Zuckerberg, who said it's not my job to be the arbiter of truth. You have that model, and then you have the Dorsey model, which is completely incoherent in the way it's deployed and not fact-checking Chinese propaganda until minutes ago, but fact-checking the president in a way that is untruthful.
Kayleigh, on the substance of the president's tweets that are in question about mail-in voting, the Tampa Bay Times is reporting that you've cast your ballots, I believe, 11 times by mail-in voting. So why is it okay for you to do it? I understand you're traveling, you're in a different city, but how can we be assured that your votes were counted accurately, but when other people do it, it's fraud?
The president's been very clear. Every American is entitled to vote the way that I did. If you are someone who's working out of state, but your domicile is in a different state, you are absolutely entitled to request an absentee ballot and to cast your ballot by mail. I'm entitled to that. The average viewer watching is entitled to that. The president has no qualms with that. He's for absentee voting for a reason. What he's not for is mass mail-in voting, what Nancy Pelosi is asking for, which we know is subject to fraud, where automatically the state sends to all of its voter rolls a ballot, where in LA County you have 112% of the population registered. Ask yourself how that happens. And 112% of the population gets a ballot. Well, that leaves 12% subject to fraud, at least 12%. So that's what he's against. He's not against the average everyday American who has a reason for casting their ballot to get an absentee and cast in that manner.
Okay, so that's where the White House stands on that issue. Meanwhile, this morning there's